time. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Many of you may know my name. I am Tracy with the Montana State Library. I'm a lead consulting and learning librarian. And today's webinar is the third in our series, and it's going to be about feedback, which is one of the probably most challenging and most important pieces when you're working with people. As always, those of you who've been to my sessions in the past know I like to warm you up with a little bit of a question. If you want to just post in chat, I would really like to know if you have had a good boss, what characteristics or behaviors made them such a good boss? And if sadly you have not had a good boss, what do you think would make a good boss? Because what I suspect will happen is some of you will share answers that will be very relevant to our conversation today. So, and you are welcome to unmute. By the way, this is being recorded, but if you're comfortable having your voice recorded, you can definitely unmute and just share. But I would love to know what makes a good boss, because if you haven't guessed, the hope of this series is that it will give you some skills to be a good boss if you happen to be a supervisor. So Heather, driven, leads by example, sets standards and structure from the first day. They trust you, they listen, and they are available. Listening is becoming a theme. Absolutely. Clear and frequent communication about what's needed and expected. Trust and being supportive.
On the end of listening, I heard once that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we would listen twice as much as we speak. And in leadership, that's the greatest leaders that I've had, the greatest bosses I've had really modeled that. They did a lot of listening.
Nice. They're willing to advocate for what their employees need. One of my best bosses was firm, but also very personable and fair. She was excellent, standing up for her employees. Great. Listening is definitely a key. That we feel supported is key. I guess I would ask you, what behaviors do they exhibit when you feel supported? I think listening, that's clearly one. I had goals, so you knew where you were going, clear and communicative, friendly, but not too friendly. It's definitely an art, for sure. Anything else? Okay. Advocate for what you need.
Tracy, I'll just say this so I don't have to type it. But the last really good boss I had, and this was many, many years ago, but she knew really well how to work with the different employees in the office. She knew how to work with the salesperson, which was different than working with the front desk person, which was different than working with the group of people that I was working with. She knew how to handle salespeople. And she used to tell me, you really got to be careful with salespeople and you really got to give them love. And, so it was just really interesting. She just knew how to take each position and the behaviors and with those individuals and get the best out of them. She was really good at that.
That is a gift, actually. And that is, I think, for all of us, one of the biggest challenges of being a supervisor is we all have our preferences. And yet the people working for us are going to be different and likely should be different depending on the position and the job and what's needed. And we have to meet them where they are, which is really an excellent kind of lead in to this webinar. Because feedback and giving regular feedback is actually one of the ways you can do that. We could probably do an HR webinar every month because it really is about building workplace culture and it's about how you show up. For today, I want to share some insights from actual human resources consultants and professionals. I want to talk about positive feedback because sometimes we forget about that. And then I will spend more time on what I kind of call critical negative feedback, constructive feedback. because that's the area where I think we all feel kind of the most stress. And then we are going to talk about follow-up because that's actually part of the process as well. You know, as always, feel free to put your questions in chat, and I will try to pause and ask if there are any questions. And I'll, of course, be enlisting you to practice. I don't think anything listed on this slide is a surprise to many of you. The truth is, performance management is an ongoing active process. And that's one thing that we sometimes do. It can feel awkward to give feedback to people. And yet, if we make it a part of our everyday work culture, it becomes less of a struggle, I would say. We build our feedback muscles. It becomes just part of communication and working better together instead of this once a year annual evaluation. So when it is an ongoing active process, then the second one tends to take care of itself. And this is one I suspect many of you've heard. Typically, we're referring to it when we're talking about annual evaluations. Like, you're not supposed to tell anyone anything on that annual evaluation that is a surprise to them. Now, it's impossible probably to have absolutely no surprises, because sometimes even when an employee is engaging in some kind of behavior that is hurting us or hurting them, you know, we think it's obvious and it may not be obvious to them. But what you're really looking for with Aim for No Surprises is like no big surprises. Like, they know that this is a problem. You don't spring it on them after you've, you know, stewed about it or there's resentment. It's instead part of just ongoing working with them so that they can be their best selves at work. This next one, for some of you actually mentioned this in the what characteristics a good boss has, as you said, they communicated clearly and concisely. Like, you knew where you were going, you knew what was expected of you, you know, you had that feedback mechanism. Others of you may struggle a bit with this. I am in this category. I'm actually trying to work harder on being clear and being concise. You know, I score pretty high on the intuitive creative side, and that means sometimes I'm not able to be as concise as I would like to be. And so I'm going to share with you one framework in case some of you fall in this category like me, where you could definitely be more precise and more clear about what you are expecting. It turns out that feedback, and actually much of HR, preparing and following up are pretty important. Feedback, particularly constructive feedback, is not something that you really want to wing. It's actually something you want to think about, because it really does have an impact. And that was something Jonna was referring, is her boss knew that she needed to give and deliver her feedback in a different way depending on the employee. And that is that preparation piece. The other piece of this is the follow-up. Sometimes people will chat with me about giving feedback and then the problem keeps happening. And oftentimes when you see the problem keep happening, there's a lack of follow-up that's not occurring. So it's really important that if you need to give someone feedback, you follow up with them. And it's part of that accountability piece and the piece that communicates, no, this is really serious. You do really need to work on this. And then any HR professional would tell you that documentation is important. I fully acknowledge that this can be one of the harder pieces to do. Most people are working managers, so they're doing so many other things, and documentation is one of those things that can fall by the wayside. It is important, and it becomes critically important if you move into a situation where you may need to progressively discipline someone or terminate them, because it actually shows communication occurred, and it shows that you had reasons for letting the employee go. And that's very important if you're ever involved in any litigation. It can also be quite helpful if you are required to do annual evaluations. It can be helpful for preparing for those kinds of things as well. So I want to talk a little bit about the framework that I have found really helpful. And one of the Society for Human Resource Management trainings I took talked about how to make feedback a part of the work culture. The presenter's point was when we have just annual evaluations or we just check in a couple times a year, that automatically makes a situation where we are giving an employee feedback more stressful, right? Because as supervisors, we do have a lot of impact on their jobs, and many people need their jobs to survive. And so when we are giving feedback once or twice a year, and that's it, that puts an enormous amount of pressure on us and on the employee. And so this person actually pointed out that it's really good to give feedback regularly, to give and actually to ask for feedback as a supervisor. So we're just going to pause for a moment and take a look at this chat that came up. Thank you, Colette. So Colette shared the Society for Human Resource Management link with you. A membership is not too expensive, and the resources that are available are quite amazing. So let me share this framework. There's a lot of frameworks for giving feedback. There's one called GIFT, which is you gain permission to give feedback. You kind of seek to work together. I found for me, this situation behavior impact, what I call SBI, has worked really great. And it's the one I'm going to share with you today. And you're welcome to use it if you would like. We will practice with it. But in essence, you identify the situation. So what was happening? What were the circumstances? You talk about the behavior. So what did the employee do? And then you share the impact. What was the impact it had on others? And so I'll give a simple example. Let's say the situation is our front desk person that we just hired helped an individual who recently had a knee replacement carry their items from the library out to their car. So the behavior is the employee carried the items out to the car. The impact of that was they made that person's life much easier. They made it possible for that person to get their items. They probably left a lasting positive impression on that person. And actually, other people probably saw that and were also impressed. And so if you're giving feedback to that employee, you might say, thank you for helping that individual. They obviously had just kind of had a knee replacement and they needed some help getting their items out to the car. And you took the time to carry those items out to their car, which is a little bit above and beyond. But the impact on that was they were able to use the library. They obviously left with a very positive impression of the library. And I really appreciate the customer service you showed. So that's an example of how you use situation behavior impact to give feedback to people. The other thing that this presenter made a point of saying is to seek feedback as a supervisor. And this is tricky because you have to make it safe as a boss to be able to receive feedback, but it actually levels the playing field if you think about it. Also, your employees are some of the best ones to give you feedback about how you can improve. So if you want to be a better boss, the people you supervise are probably the ones who have the best pieces of information about how to get better at that. But you do have to make it safe, and that can be challenging to do. One of the things that I will do is, what am I doing well and should keep doing? What do I need to start doing? And what should I stop doing? And those are just questions that can be really helpful for improving overall performance. So that's another little piece that I recommend. One thing I want to kind of leave you with is this question of how do you make sure that you are giving feedback? Like, how do you do that and make it a regular part of your process? Because I think that this point about giving feedback regularly being a part of the process is really well taken. It really does take that sting out of it. So does anyone have any tips they would like to share? Because in my experience, we have a lot of supervisors attending this webinar. How do you make sure that you're regularly giving feedback to people?
Tracy, I just tell them thank you all day long when they've done something. Thanks, guys. Thanks for getting that done. Appreciate you getting that done for me. Or if I see that they've done something I didn't ask them to do, or they got ahead on something, hey, see, thanks for catching that and getting it done before we need to actually get it done. So I just try all day long because we're small, so we're around each other all day. So
Yep.
yeah, that's what I try to do is just be like, thanks, guys, or appreciate you get that done for me. Or if I ask them to do it, I follow up later after they've done it and said, hey, thanks for getting that done for me. I really appreciate it. So that's what I try to
Nice.
do.
Nice. Yep. Nikki says, don't wait, do it right away. Absolutely. Same as Heather. Yeah. I try to acknowledge in the moment and explain why it was important. Great. I think that's one of the things I've found with the situation behavior impact. It allows me to actually give the feedback in a really meaningful, detailed way. And that's something that can be very helpful for staff. And one of the things I've realized is it helps them see their own strengths. So Tony says, we look to have regular check-ins with staff, and personally, I strive to give that timely and specific feedback when I see them doing great things. Every day I check in with staff to see how they are and how I can help them. In addition to this, I too use appreciation as a way to acknowledge their worth to me in the library. Great. This gentleman that taught this session actually said he has like a little sticky note with his employees' names, and he just puts a little check mark, did I give this person feedback? And he's found it actually really helpful for identifying when perhaps he just unintentionally is missing someone. So that's another piece to just make sure as supervisors that we are touching everyone and we're seeing everyone's strengths. And in the hiring webinar, I talked about how we have our own bias and there are certain personality types that we might naturally feel more comfortable working with. And so being mindful of that and being aware of that and making sure that we're not forgetting the ones that we're uncomfortable with, but who are still doing good work as well. So you led really nicely into this giving positive feedback. So I'm really glad to hear that people are saying thank you and expressing gratitude. I call it the semi-lost art of please and thank you because I think the speed at which things move and the stressors that we sometimes see, we sometimes forget please and thank you and their power. If you think about it, there's absolutely a difference between saying, shelve those books and please shelve those books, right? Or thank you for doing that. And I know some people will say, well, they're just doing their job. But we all know as humans and as people, we have a lot going on in our life. And so sometimes they deserve a thank you for doing their job because they're doing it perhaps while taking care of aging parents and helping their kids go off to college. So we all have those stresses, and having our supervisors and our coworkers express their appreciation for doing our work does make a difference in how we feel. So I'll pause here and see. Tony says, one of the questions that I ask at our team weekly huddles is what is not working. That's more organizational, but individual issues come out that can be followed on later. That's excellent, Tony. That's a really wonderful way to kind of work on the work culture stuff as well. I mentioned giving specific feedback using the SBI model. When I kind of committed to actually doing that, one of the things I learned was how powerful it is to give that specific feedback, how it really helps people shine and feel truly appreciated, because it's not just thank you. It's like that specific skill set or gift that you have had this impact, and it really helped me or your colleagues or the customers in this way. And that is incredibly powerful for people. The other thing that we often forget about is, if you are someone who supervises multiple people, you may have someone that you're really working with, and they might take a lot of energy, and you forget about those folks who are just quietly carrying on, who are doing so much work. And so I wanted to ask you, How do you acknowledge and recognize your high performers? Like, how do you actually say thank you to those of your employees who are kind of really just doing such a wonderful job? How do you acknowledge them? This is a hard one. If it makes you feel better, if you were to choose to get your membership at the Society for Human Resource Management, there's way more resources about how to handle an employee that's struggling. Yeah, I think it's important for us to think about our high performers.
Sometimes, Tracy, when I'm just out and about doing something, I might see something and think of them. So I pick it up for them and just bring it. So, hey, just a little something to say thank you. Just something random for no reason at any point in time. Cause I think random shows genuineness.
Yep.
So I do that every once in a while. I mean, we do coffee at least once a week, if not more, but that's because we're coffee addicts. So that's also a problem. But yeah.
As a fellow coffee addict, I'm not sure that's a problem. Have any of you thought about just asking them how they like receiving feedback? Sometimes we forget about that. Okay. So another one, when you go on trips, sometimes you'll bring them back. At the end of the workday, I always wish them a good evening and thank them for their work that day, even if no big moments to acknowledge. Absolutely. I really would encourage you to think about this one and maybe even ask your high performers, do they like receiving public feedback? Do they like private feedback? Tony says, I like to speak directly to staff. Let them know that I see their good work. Also ask them how it's going. I tend to go into their offices to build them up and thank them for their extra work. I also like to bring in flowers from my garden and lay them on their desk or little notes. I love to place little notes of my appreciation for the things they do for me in the library. It's human nature to focus on problems first. Gratitude takes practice. The nice thing is that it makes the giver feel good as well as the recipient. Absolutely. That is very true.
I also like to remind them too, Tracy, when we have something go on, and like we get great feedback on our Facebook page or we have people out in the public saying stuff. I said, that's because of you guys. It's because of what you've done.
Nice.
Because if you guys aren't doing what you're doing, that kind of stuff's not going to happen. So I like to do that too.
That is very nice. Just to kind of acknowledge how they contribute to the library's success. Give them a special gift. Absolutely. Good. I'm glad that all of you are thinking about this. I didn't go into it in this webinar, but many of you, when I asked you about the characteristics of a good boss, you mentioned trust. And trust, the formula for trust is you build trust by giving positive feedback. It's actually, when you think about why you trust someone, it's their credibility. Do they know what they're talking about? Their reliability. Will they actually do the work? But it's also the way we interact day to day. And when you give that positive feedback, then you are depositing into the trust bank account. And then when you have to give negative feedback, that's a withdrawal. And that's why you really want to make sure that you are giving regular positive feedback as well. Oh, thank you, Cole. So Cole shared a resource for employee recognition ideas. And I do strongly encourage you, if you haven't, to ask your people how they like to receive feedback and how they like to be recognized, because everyone's different. Some people love a little gift. Some people love a little note. Some people want public recognition. Some people are fine with private. So let's actually practice. So, we hired this front desk person in the first webinar, for those of you who didn't go to the hiring one. And we're looking out. Our new front desk person is doing a good job. So first of all, how do you know your front desk person is doing a good job? Let's just kind of share some characteristics. And again, you can unmute or you can type in the chat, whatever works best for you. But how do you know? Because we're going to practice. What do you see? Thank you for sharing, Simon Sinek. Great customer service. So what behavior? Okay, feedback from patrons. The patrons' reactions show quite a bit. So what is the behavior that you see? And that's something I had to learn as I'm practicing getting clearer. Like, what behavior happens when good customer service is going on? Or what reactions do patrons give you? Patrons showing gratitude, okay? So they're maybe smiling, saying thank you, smiling, friendly, attentive, personable, polite interactions. People leave happy, good patron reports, positive work growth, great. Positive behavior. What does positive behavior look like? Patron visiting with staff, they're engaged with patrons, interested in building relationships. Patrons seek them out. Front desk staff immediately greeting a patron when they come to the desk. Positive body language, tone of voice is friendly, and ease of vibes. Yep. So the reason that I asked you to do that is because when you're trying to be specific, saying you provided great customer service is important, but it doesn't actually name the behavior that occurred. And that it's probably a little more important when you're giving constructive feedback, but it's still really important for positive feedback. Like, what is it specifically that that person does that actually helps people feel welcome? Okay, so employees being proactive when they see a patron who might need help. A smile in their voice, absolutely, absolutely. So if I think about taking some of these, I might say to my front desk person, hey, I've been observing you as you help people. I'm really impressed with the way that you greet them when they come in. You smile at them, you engage them in a little small talk, and then you help them with their issue. And when you do that, I can see the patron express their gratitude, smile back at you, and leave the library with a lightness in their step. So do you see how that actually is much more specific than, hey, you've been providing great customer service and people are leaving happy. I hope that makes sense, why I'm actually asking you to think beyond just great customer service, but into the actual behaviors. Does that make sense? I'm doing it on the fly. That's always kind of fun. Talk about not preparing. We talk about how great customer service starts with being transactional, getting them what they need, and over time it builds relationships and strengthens community. Looks like making connections. Okay, good. Great. So it sounds like that helped actually. Oh, nice. That's a great example of a very specific behavior, Mary, in the small library, the having the one employee that's aware of reading needs and wants and scanning and setting aside books for patrons. That definitely makes the patrons feel respected and welcome. Anything else? Any other questions or anything you want to chat about with the positive before we flip over to the constructive feedback? Okay. So sometimes you have to give people constructive feedback. So rule number one, it is always, always, always about the work. And, sometimes that's really obvious, like if the person is always late or is calling in a lot. But a lot of times when people call me and they ask for help with a situation like this, it's sometimes a characteristic or behavior that person is exhibiting. So it's like the bad attitude or being rude. And so when those situations happen, you need to be sure that you are addressing the work, not the person's personality, and not who they are as individuals. And it's a subtle difference, but it's a very important difference. The next thing is what I was asking you to practice with the positive feedback, and I'll ask you to do the same with the negative feedback, is you really need to give yourself and your employee the gift of clarity. So what exactly is going on and what is its impact on others? And this is where that preparation time becomes really critical. I would say if you're giving positive feedback, in the moment's great. If you don't naturally have the ability to be clear about things, negative feedback, give yourself the gift of a few moments to think about what you're going to say, how you're going to say it, and what you need to change as a result of that. I really can't emphasize enough the power of impact when you are giving constructive feedback. It may seem really, really obvious to you what the impact of problem behavior is, but it may not be obvious to the employee. Some of the leadership development people that I have read over the years point out most people in that moment in time think they are being their best selves or they're doing the best that they can. And so part of your job as a supervisor is helping them understand the impact of their behavior on themselves and on others. And that can shift things. This next one is perspective taking. And that is about putting yourself in the employee's shoes. So it's pausing for a moment and thinking about this behavior from an employee. Like, why might that employee be acting this way? And the reason that I recommend doing this is that it can be very insightful. It can reveal to you perhaps a training need. It can reveal to you some kind of workplace culture thing that's going on. Sometimes when there's a problem with performance, it's actually about the system or something else. I think most of you probably recognize this. When there's tension or conflict going on, there's a lot of different things that are creating that tension or that conflict. Sometimes it is the employee's behavior needs to be changed, but sometimes there are other factors. Like if the employee is starting to gossip and you do this perspective taking and you realize that gossip is a part of your workplace culture, then you need to address all of that, right? And that changes how you approach that employee. And so I do really encourage taking the time to think about why the employee might be behaving this way, and then use that to guide your conversation. The next one is to think about how your employee might respond and to prepare for them. You'll remember earlier I said as the supervisor, you have a lot of influence over their job, and most people need a job to put food on the table, to pay the bills. It literally is about survival. And so when you need to give someone constructive feedback, you are threatening their survival. And it's pretty natural for people to have the 4 responses: the flight, fight, freeze, or fawn. And so they're likely to exhibit one of those depending on how serious this feedback is. Either they will fly, meaning they will try to get out of the conversation as fast as possible. They will fight, they will argue with you about it. They will freeze, which means they will say nothing, or they will fawn. They will agree with you and then not do anything afterwards. And so you just need to know enough about your employees to know which one of the ones of those they might exhibit, so that you can give them the space to get out of their amygdala, which is where those responses are happening, and into their prefrontal cortex, where they can really logically go through the conversation with you. And sometimes you may need to actually end the conversation early to give them time to process. Like that's part of giving this constructive feedback to them. And the last point I want to make is the importance of creating space. If you have to give really, really negative feedback, or you've had this conversation multiple times and it's now escalated to, we're going to go in my office and we're going to talk about it, do not attempt to give this feedback when you have back-to-back meetings or when there's so much going on at the library. It's a zoo. create the space for you and the employee to have a conversation about what's going on and how to solve the problem. And that means creating space around your schedules. It also means there are ways you can set up the space. And I teach a session that's more about giving this kind of feedback. And I talk about how you can set up the physical space so that you can communicate either we're working together or, okay, we've now moved to the stage where you really need to take this seriously. So this creating space is not just about time, it's also about the physical environment as well. So we're going to practice now. So let's say that we have a front desk person who's being rude to people and not providing good customer service. So what kind of behavior do you observe when someone is being rude? How do you know?
Well, usually they're being short with the patron. Their body language is more of a defensive position. They're very short and snappy with the patron, making them kind of feel like they're an inconvenience by the way they're talking, what they're saying to them. And tone of voice is a big one.
Yeah.
And if they can do anything to get away from whatever in the midst of, or they just walk away or they just pass them on to somebody else, that sort of thing. Or, well, I can't help you with that right now type of thing. And they wander off and leave them.
Yep. Interrupts the patron on the cell phone, ignores customers, is short. I really appreciate, Jennifer, the patron's body language. And that's really great for impact. Interrupts the patrons. Definitely. So what is the impact on customers? Patrons are upset, maybe even staff are upset. Sometimes home comes to work, raised voices, inappropriate language. Absolutely. So what is the impact on customers and other staff when our front desk person is being rude to a patron? Patrons avoid that employee. Patrons don't receive the info they're looking for. Employees have to overcompensate for their coworkers' behavior. They might not come back. Gives the library a bad name. Negative atmosphere. Kills the entire environment for staff and patrons. Yes. I think many of you mentioned that when we were talking about positive. When your staff are giving really good customer service, it lifts the library. Customers and staff are uncomfortable, may avoid future use. Patrons might go to another staff member to complain, which makes things awkward for the rude employees' colleagues. Absolutely. Oh, yes, behavior gets put on Facebook community page. That gives us a negative vibe. That's definitely a possibility. Okay, so I'm going to up the ante. Any brave souls willing to give this front desk person feedback? So the situation is the front desk person has been rude and isn't providing good customer service. Anyone ready to try and do situation, behavior, impact and give feedback? And you're welcome to go on unmute. You're also welcome to type it in chat. But how would you communicate this to this person? Is actually practicing your skills here.
I would first give that employee some chore to do that is away from people, even if it's mundane and stupid. Can you go put these paper towels away at the bathroom? Something just to give them a moment to let their temperature come down. And then once it was available to have a conversation, I would start with, "Are you okay? What's up? How's it going today?" That's how I would start.
Okay. And then what would you say to them, Nikki, after, like, let's just say, whether it's home or whatever, what would you say to them?
I would be empathetic and let them get all of that out because that actually might fix the problem. But then I would also reinforce that, you know what, you've got stuff, but guess what? We all have stuff, and we all have to come to work, and we have to leave the stuff at the door. And those patrons, they didn't understand that you had stuff.
Okay. So a lot of you mentioned to have the staff members step away from the area and then visit with them later. And that is a really good point. And I think that it's also really important to communicate the specific behaviors. And so if I were to model this after I kind of talk to the person, and I would probably say I might go for a walk if it's like the first time. Oh, let me see what Tony has to say, because Tony's really good at this. I usually start by stating the behavior that was reported or witnessed, then ask them if they can tell me what happened from their perspective. That's perfect, Tony. Okay. I want to talk to you about your work at the desk. I noticed raised voices from you and a patron at the desk a little while ago, and other patrons looking around. Can you tell me what happened? Excellent. Hey, I noticed there was a bit of a frosty tone with the patron earlier. Was there something going on? Thank you for bringing up the sandwich method, Mary. So studies have recently shown that that actually doesn't work, that people don't know what to focus on. And so they'll either focus on the good or they'll focus on the negative, and then they don't really know what to do. And so now HR professionals really recommends that you just talk about the negative. And that's why it's really, really important to practice positive feedback throughout the year. Because when you have to give this negative feedback, you need to just give the negative feedback. And so, my example of how I would handle this is I definitely would give them time, and then I would ask them for their perspective. But I would say, I saw you interrupt that patron. I saw you ignore them, turn away from them, walk away from them. And I saw the hurt on that person's face. They didn't get what they needed. And then another staff member had to come in and rescue the situation and help that patron so the patron got what they needed. What's your perspective? And then that does open the door for a conversation. But I would definitely share with them the behavior, because if we say that you are being rude, different people have a different definition of rude. Like, we might consider it rude to be looking at your cell phone instead of looking up and greeting people. But your front desk person might not know that. Maybe they're new in the workforce, or maybe they have a different cultural background, or maybe just a different way of looking at the world. And that's why it's really helpful to indicate the behavior, because if you say, maybe this is the second or third time, and you say, hey, we've talked about you being rude, and they're like, well, I fixed it. Like, I smile at people or whatever. But the real issue is they keep looking at their cell phone and ignoring the patrons. So that's why you want to really think about what is the behavior you need them to change. Oh, that's a great question. So how do you address a conversation where you didn't see the action or interaction, but was told to you by another staff member or patron? What do people think? I'll ask for the wisdom of the room before I share my thoughts on that. And I just want to take a look at Tony's. He said we also connect our observed behaviors with our core values, saying we believe in respect for self and others, and the behavior we saw today is not in alignment with that value. Okay. So Annika mentioned she has had that experience with the sandwich method. That's a good point, Colette, about some respond and some don't. To kind of begin to answer Jonna's question about how do you handle it if someone else shares it with you, I think it depends on the severity. Tony mentions he does an investigation. So, I probably would approach the staff member and I would say, hey, someone mentioned that this happened, and I'd really like to hear your perspective. You know, did that happen? Did it not happen? It is much harder with staff. That's a really great point. Like it's easier with patrons to say that a patron spoke to me about this, harder with staff. You know, and that is something that could happen. They'd be like, well, who told you that? And then it's really like you're trying to bring it back. So I'll just try to model it. If I were in that situation and say, you know, what I really want to focus on is just understanding, did this behavior happen? Did you, in fact, spend all of your afternoon on the cell phone and ignore the patrons? That's what I really want to understand, because I want what's best for you. I want customers to be served well. And I want to believe that you are aware that when you look at your cell phone and you ignore people, that makes people feel hurt or like they can't get their needs addressed. I would definitely say, you know, you may not get an honest answer with the person, but the reason why I recommend addressing it is because not addressing it can foster resentment on all cases. The other thing is, of course, you have to take into consideration the person who gave the feedback. If there is tension between those two individuals and there's some doubt as to the accuracy of the feedback, then you have to proceed with caution. However, I probably would say if your intuition tells you that there's either truth to this or there's something deeper going on, I would lean into that and have that conversation, even though it's really hard. But I would definitely say, please tell me your perspective, and then have the conversation be about the behavior and the impact that that behavior might have, and then lean into, I guess, observation mode is what I would do. So I see that some chat kind of flew in. So let me just see if there's anything that anyone had to say. Yes, it is very common for people to have a hard time with negative feedback. People do struggle a lot with that, and that goes back to that survival mechanism. And that's why sometimes it can be helpful to model receiving negative feedback, or to model, I realize there's this thing I need to work on, and I'm going to share that I am working on it, so that it's I hope seems safer to work on behaviors that are problematic, if that makes sense. Any other thoughts on what I shared? Like, it's perfectly okay to say we disagree with you, Tracy. We would not go talk to the employee about something being reported. And I think we all agree with you, Colette, bad behavior can be infectious. Yeah, that's a really tough one.
I think something else that helps with negative feedback, because everybody's got to have it, because nobody's perfect, is when you, as the director or supervisor or whatever, if you mess something up and you go to your staff, you say, I'm sorry, I messed that up. I will make sure next time that I do this instead. Because I think the next time you have those conversations with them that aren't the great conversations, they're going to be like, well, yeah, it's about bettering what we're doing here. It's not a personal attack on me.
Yes, you said that much better than me, Heather. That's what I was trying to point out. It's like, as a boss, if you make a mistake, apologizing and admitting that you made the mistake and you're going to change the behavior is huge. So I want to talk just a little bit about when you sit down and you have the actual conversation with the person. And as I mentioned earlier, and I think I have a little bit more time to kind of talk about how you set up the space. If this is the very first time you are having the conversation with the person, then I actually would recommend saying, hey, let's go take a walk. And you're walking side by side. This is actually something that in intense conflict situations, mediators will recommend. There's something about the movement and the side by side that makes it, we're working on this together. If you have needed to perhaps mention this problem behavior multiple times, Then you move into a situation where you want to create a more formal environment. You may want to invite someone if you've reached that level. And inviting a second person communicates the severity of the conversation. It also gives you a witness. So like the first time I might do a walking meeting, the second time I might call them into my office and have them sit down and say, hey, here we are again. But the third time, I might invite a board chair, or if I'm lucky enough to have some support from my county or my city, I might invite them. And we have the conversation together. So how you set up this space communicates we're working together versus I really need you to pay attention. So if you sit side by side, that is a physical makeup that communicates we're working together. If you need to communicate severity, like this is your third or fourth time having the conversation, then you put them across the desk from you. And if you have that other individual with you, they sit beside you and the employee's there. Those physical things communicate severity. And that's really important to help people understand, okay, this is like the fourth time we've had this conversation. Now we really need you to fix this behavior. When you are in the conversation, you want to present what's going on. And so this is the situation, this is the behavior I saw, this is how it's impacting us. Please tell me your perspective. What are you thinking? And if you are hoping that they can contribute a solution, you definitely want to listen. It's like Tony said at the beginning, you have 2 ears, 1 mouth. Listen more than you speak. And this is very true. But the one thing I didn't include in my initial one is before you go into this conversation, it's helpful for you to be clear on what your minimums are. Like, I need to see this change in behavior. So if it's, I need to see them not looking at their cell phone during the workday and ignoring patrons, then you need to be clear with them that that's the minimum. And how are they going to do that? And so you want to definitely seek solutions. If it's those first 1 or 2 conversations, it can be much with camaraderie, and we're in this together. If you've tried everything and it's just not working, then you need to kind of be very clear about what's going to happen to them if this isn't solved. And that's where you can kind of get into, if this behavior does not change, these will be the consequences. And part of that seeking solutions is having them identify what they're going to do differently, having you identify what you're going to do differently, and both together agreeing how often you're going to check in on the issue. And then you're going to summarize the conversation for them as well. So you open, you spend a lot of time listening, you seek solutions, and then you summarize what was discussed and what you decided. And Tony mentions, I like a round table for in between, side by side, and a more formal across the desktop talk. And that's a great suggestion, Tony. A round table also communicates we're in this together. Okay. So one thing you need to remember is that these conversations are likely going to be stressful for you and for your employee. And so it's a good idea to build yourself time to take care of yourself in whatever way you need. If it's you go for a walk, if it's that you just take some deep breaths, just acknowledge the human in you. And if this is a particularly stressful conversation, give yourself the time to recover. Give your employee the time to recover. So timing of this conversation can be pretty critical. If this is a pretty intense conversation that has some serious ramifications for the employee, like for instance, they may be terminated if they don't fix this behavior, you may want to have the conversation on a day and at a time where, if necessary, you can let that employee go home. Because if they're really angry or they're really upset, obviously that's going to impact everyone around you. You absolutely must document the conversation and send it to the employee. And you do this for a couple reasons. You do it so that they have something they can review. That helps them. And it also documents that it happened and that they do know. And then it's the follow-up piece. And so whatever you agreed on in the meeting, you want to make sure that you do. So if you say, I'm going to check in with you next week about the cell phone usage, then you need to do that. Or if you say, every time I see you pick up your cell phone, I'm going to walk over and I'm going to remind you that we agreed you were going to put the cell phone away except for during break hours. And you have to do that. And it's very hard to do that, but it's one of the most critical pieces. Because if you just tell the person, but you never follow up with them and you never actually implement the consequences, then what you've really communicated to the employee is this isn't actually all that important. They can continue to engage in the bad behavior. They just have to put up with conversations. And that's frustrating for you and for others as well. So those are just kind of some general notes. Would anyone like to add anything else? Do you have any other questions in the about 5 or 6 minutes we have left? Okay. Well, we have one more in the HR series. Corey Sloan is going to be leading our last series on September 1st, and this is kind of what to do when an employee leaves. That session will also be 11 a.m. to noon, and it will be recorded as well. And so you can certainly get access to our courses on MSL Learn. Just a few follow-up instructions. If you just want to rewatch this, you can get access to the video on the YouTube channel. You're welcome to share this with others. I did create an information sheet with just some of my tips. For those of you who might need credit, then and you are in Montana, then you just need to enroll in the MSL Learn course and complete the activities and get a badge and credit. And just a reminder, you have to log into MSL Learn to enroll. And if you don't need credit, but you'd be willing to give us some feedback, that would be super helpful. We'd love to know how we can make this series better, or if there are topics you would like us to explore in future webinars, that's actually really, really helpful. And with that, thank you. And feel free to reach out if you have any questions, because I know it can be tricky to give feedback as well. So I'll just hang out for a couple minutes, but thank you all for joining us today and have a great rest of your day. And Jonna, you will need to log into MSL Learn and enroll in this course and complete the evaluation, and then you will earn your credit. Awesome.